Welcome to Ellesmere Yard. Ellesmere Yard is an outstanding example of a purpose-built canal yard. It dates from around 1806 and it was the office and workshop of the Shropshire Union Railway and Canal Company. Thomas Telford was the engineer for the Shropshire Union Canal Company and it was he who recommended the building of the yard. So we are inside the building that was finished in 1807. It's a dry dock and it's an amazing bit of old engineering. So you bring your boat in, slide all the stop planks in place, block the holes up with ash from your fire, and then using this mechanism here, works just like a lock. You wind the handle and the paddle at the bottom is lifted, making a hole, and the water drains away. It takes about 20 minutes for the whole of this dry dock to empty. And then you can work on your boat. These people are painting theirs. I'm standing in front of the building they refer to as the Pine Loft. When it was first built in 1806, 1807-ish, it was a single-storey building. But over time, it's been made into 2 stories. Now, Pine Loft is where they used to store the wood. Now, underneath is the storage, and there are all sorts of bays there. All around the yard is different areas. And what they did was they numbered them. So this little building here is number 35. These rails they had a push cart to move heavy goods around the goods yard, and the rails went from one part of the yard to another. So it went all the way around. They disappear under the tarmac here, but you can imagine. So these rails go into bay 36. And the push cart would be pushed around to different parts of the yard as and when needed. In the 1890s, in the back corner of the Pine Loft, on the bottom floor, they installed a Cornish boiler, and that ran a steam engine that ran all the machines that we'll go and see in a minute. This is the building that used to house the steam engine. There would be a shaft that would go through the wall into the blacksmiths and the joinery department to run their machines. And in the corner here is a 19th century urinal. Welcome to the forge. This is where the blacksmiths used to work. Over here, 2 blacksmiths would work. Each blacksmith had their very own striker. The striker was a labourer, and what his job was to wield the hammer. The blacksmith would be taking the metal in and out of the fire, into the water, moving it around. The striker would just keep pounding with a hammer, and the blacksmith would work the metal. If a blacksmith was given a job that he'd never done before, and he needed a particular tool for it, he found it much easier to actually make his tool. So over here, we have a great array of different shaped tools. And I suppose over time, as he made more and more tools, he found it difficult to find the tool he needed. So we just made another one. And we've ended up with hundreds of them. If you look up, there are all sorts of wheels and things on the ceiling. They used to be powered by the steam engine. The shaft would come through the wall and attach to all these wheels and pulleys and go right the way down the building to work the belt drive. In the floor, you will see a round circle. It's quite large. That is how they use that to put metal rims on cartwheels. It's thought that they probably had a fire pit outside, so the metal rim would be heated equally in a much larger fire pit because the forge isn't big enough for a cartwheel rim. So it'd be heated outside, carried through using special tools that we can see upstairs, and then the rim would be put on the wooden Cartwheel here by the blacksmith. Welcome to the pattern room. In this room are hundreds and hundreds of what they call patterns. They are pieces of wood shaped, and they are shaped to make pieces of metal. So this is the joinery department. Lots of things made out of wood, funnily enough. The foreman of the yard had his own little table, his office area, which is what's behind me. And he would sit there and have a really good view of the whole of the yard so he can check that all the guys are working as they should. This pattern here was made in 2018, and it was made for the footbridge at Beeston Iron Lock on the Shropshire Union Canal. Now, that footbridge was closed for about 9 months because the handrail came loose and was therefore not safe. And lots of people were saying, well, that's ridiculous. All you need to do is screw it back on. What's the matter? But most things that the Canal and River Trust have to look after are protected by English heritage. So they can't just stick a screw in that they bought from Screwfix. It needs to be an authentic screw. So they had to make the pattern for the support column for the handrail first, and then they would take the pattern and cast it. Then it would be worked by a heritage blacksmith before it could be installed and the handrail mended. So all of those things obviously take a lot of time. I particularly like these patterns. Now, not sure what they're used for, possibly decorative metal work that would be round a fireplace in somebody's home belonging to the Canal and River Trust, something like that. So this would be pressed into the sand and then cast as a metal decorative. And this one here, dated 1914, you can see here where it was started, and then it gets fainter and fainter towards this end, and you can see where they've drawn in pencil where they're going to carve out, but it was never finished. If it's 1914, possibly the person that made this went to war and didn't come back. At the bottom of the doors to a lot of the workshops, a hole's been cut, and that is specifically for the yard cat, so it could come in throughout the night and get rid of the rats and mice. So, do you remember I mentioned carrying the rims of cartwheels and you needed a special tool? Well, this is it. It's really heavy in itself, so you'd have to be quite strong to be carrying molten cartwheel rims. The way it works is that the rim would be on the floor, and you take your tool and you hook it, and then as you lift it, this tool will grip the rim, and then you'd have a few men walking along carrying the cartwheel. This is the lock gate workshop. They used to make the lock gates for the Shropshire Union Canal Company in here. No longer, it's been moved to a different part of the UK now. Now, they're used to making the lock gates for the Shropshire Union Canal and the Llangollen Canal. That's a narrow canal, so the lock gates are quite small. They made lock gates for the Leeds-Liverpool. I think it's probably a one-off. And they finished the lock gates, put them on this push trolley, to get them out of the door to load them onto a boat to take them to where they needed to be, and realised that the door was too small for the lock gates. So here they got a saw and they cut big chunks out of the door frame to get the gates out. You can see up above me how this building has evolved over the time. You can see where there was a much lower roof, and then over time they needed a bigger building with a higher roof, maybe for bigger lock gates. So they raised the roof. In the roof, you can see one of the gantry cranes that they used, because obviously lock gates are really, really heavy. Now, this was made, the wheels of this gantry crane came from a train, and it actually runs on train tracks because a railway company used to own the canal company. Now, these buildings, as you know, were put up very, very long time ago. 1805 was a while back. Over the years, the buildings started to collapse, this one in particular. So it needed work doing to it. It was underpinned and rebuilt. Now, English Heritage became involved because these are English Heritage buildings. They need to be looked after. Now, English Heritage made the decision that the pointing that was used needed to be made in exactly the same way as when the building was very first made. So they made the pointing knowing it was going to stand out, looking brand new. So the pointing on this building is original, but very, very obvious. It's not had time to weather. In 200 years' time, it might blend in. If you've enjoyed the look round Ellesmere Yard, please subscribe or follow the channel. It really helps, and if you could smash the like button, that's even better.